it should come on. So that's grand. So what I was going to do, lads, I was just going to go through a presentation, just share it on the on Drive, and just run through it about gamification and youth work. Is that okay? And I'll sort of stop occasionally. We can have a chat if needs be. But is there anything sort of that's come up since last week that anybody wants to share? Is there anything you've been doing that has been
just quiz at the end, that you had to do at the end of the last session? It didn't seem to record the answers correctly. It was just showing up like 0%, no matter what you put in.
Oh, was it at the quiz?
Yeah, I don't know if I thought I'd emailed it to you. Maybe I've emailed it to a different Paul.
Okay.
I sent you screenshots of it.
Okay.
No, I emailed you about that as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, that's cool. But did you get through the questions? Did you get through the 2 questions? Did it allow you finish the 3 questions?
Yeah, but just showed that
it showed 0. Okay, no,
yeah.
that's I'll fix that. That's great. Yeah. If you do this week's quiz, it'll probably do the same thing until I get the settings changed. But I'll get that done this evening.
Grand. Okay, cool.
Cool, good stuff. Okay. So what I've done as well, I've put a video of last week's session. I just redid it myself, and I put it up on the site. Somebody else emailed me as well and just mentioned that it might be handier, or it might have been Barbara mentioned it, that it might be handier if the dates were attached to the sessions, just so people can keep track. So I've done that, and there's dates now attached to the session. So rather than rely on the title, you get a sense from you know which one goes with which date. Okay, so what I'll just do is I'll pull up the presentation here. Okay, so it's just really, I mean, what I just wanted to run through today was, and I'll, do stop me at any stage, but just to look at gamification in youth work. And I suppose the important thing to be conscious of is that gamification within youth work, within education, within business, gamification has a very specific meaning that's quite different. It's related, but it's different to games and using games in youth work, and I'll look at that in a second. So the definition of gamification is the use of game elements and game design techniques in non-game contexts. Okay, so I suppose one of the things that it's not is that it's not using games in your practice. So it's not taking a game like Candy Crush, using it, and then discussing, I suppose, things that emerge from it. So it's not actually taking a full game or even modifying a game and playing a game as part of your practice. So it's not really related. And I suppose that's probably important because some people use games and they'd refer to that as being gamification. It's not gamification, it's something quite specific, and I go through it in a minute. It's not simulation, and it's not, some people, when they talk about games and stuff, there's a whole area of science called game theory, and it's nothing really to do with that. But what it is it's about, it's about taking bits of games and using those bits of games in youth work. And everybody does it. Youth work is full of gamification. It's not called gamification. It's called lots of different things. But if somebody with a games background looked at youth work, they'd say, God, there's loads of gamification in youth work. As there is increasingly in education, especially primary school education. I mean, we'll look at it in a second, but giving out stickers and all of that sort of stuff, that's all gamification. And a lot of the research would say that there's real benefits around motivation and engagement in gamification. So by adding little sort of techniques to learning that people recognize as being parts of games, it can make things more motivating. It can drive engagement, and it can promote interactivity. I suppose the other thing as well is that sometimes it can help people to moderate their behavior. So, you know, you can reward people, or you can have leaderboards, and we'll talk about those in a second, and they can be rewarded on the part of behavioural change. So a lot of even behavior modification therapy, some people would say that there's elements of gamification in behavior modification therapy in terms of being rewarded for small changes in behavior. So the gamification would be used a good bit to look at behavior. And the other sort of thing is sort of around authentic practice. So what we mean by that really is that it's not making a game out of, it's not actually playing games. So you can still do you can still do a plan for a session, or you can still do a a piece of work that's reasonably, has nothing to do with games, or there's no game, but you can add a bit of a game to it. So you're still doing, whether in a formal education setting, you might still say it's the curriculum, and in a youth work setting, it's still the youth work curriculum, or it's still the youth work process, or the activities that you've been engaged with in youth work, but it adds a bit of a game element to it. So it's not using games or playing games, but it's adding a game element to what you'd otherwise be doing in a youth work context. And the last one is that generally in gamification, what you encourage people to do is you encourage people to reflect. So if it's an opportunity to give somebody a reward, or acknowledge somebody's contribution, or change a leaderboard to reflect how people are doing, that gives you an opportunity to pause your activity and to reflect on how people are doing, what's working, what isn't working for people. So I suppose in some ways they're the benefits that would be associated with gamification. And there's two sort of contexts in which gamification would be looked at. One is in a youth work context. For example, if your work in internal gamification is where you already know the young people and they're already engaged with the project, and they're within a youth club, or they're within a youth project, or they're staff within a youth work organization. So they know each other, they know the organization, they know why they're there, and you introduce gamification just to get them involved in whether it's training or activities. So it's gamification in terms of internal gamification. So it's gamification among a group of people who already know each other and know why they're there. And lots of organizations use gamification, whether they call it gamification or not, but they use gamification as a way of getting people to engage in programs internally. And then you have the whole external gamification. And this has become huge in business and marketing. And effectively, all the loyalty cards are a type of gamification. A lot of, because you spend so much money on so much products, and you get so many bonus points, and when you get a certain level of bonus points, you can exchange them for rewards, and there's a real element of it being a bit like a game. So marketing companies are using gamification the whole time to get new people involved in purchasing or engaging with initiatives. And the other thing from a marketing perspective, or not even marketing, but say one of the other ways that people are using gamification is to build relationships with people outside the organization. So use a sort of a reward system to encourage people to engage with your organization, or to increase the amount of engagement that they have from sort of an occasional to a regular. So, I mean, the typical one, and I'm a real dope for it, is the coffee stamp, where you get your coffee, and every time you get a coffee, they stamp it. And if you get 8 cups of coffee, you get a reward, or you get a free cup of coffee, or whatever it might be. Those types of things are aimed at building relationships and increasing the amount of times you come back. So I'm not. It'd be really interesting to look at how. I mean, I don't know. Has anybody ever come across, sort of in a youth work context, whether there's a sort of a scheme, or have you ever come across an initiative whereby people would be there? They'd be there'd be a sort of a loyalty scheme whereby the more they come to meetings, they'd accumulate more points, and it'd encourage them to engage in a more, how would you say, structured way with youth work initiative. Is there anything, I mean, I'm just throwing it out to you, is there anything, have you ever come across anything like that where people would be encouraged? I mean, they might have a card, and every time they come, they get a stamp. I don't know whether even something like that would work in a youth work context.
For some employability projects and the peace funded projects in the north, but not in the south, they receive like a money essentially just to pay for their transport to and from the youth club, and like as a reward system kind of thing for attending the group.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I think as well, one of the things I've found, with some of the organizations, not necessarily, well, they're youth work organizations, but say scouting organizations do it a lot, in that they award people, or they give people badges, or, you come to meetings, and you're once you get to 5 meetings, you're eligible to get onto the next level, or whatever it might be. So some of those types of organizations would use it a good bit.
Gashka as well.
Yeah, Gashka, absolutely. I mean, Gashka is really, I mean, it is really interesting in terms of how it sets you targets when you begin, and you have to in a lot of times self-regulate, even in terms of how much you achieve. But those types of things are all types of gamification. I'd notice with kids, my kids, the Irish dancing, I know it's sort of, some people would argue for it and against it, but in giving people medals for participating, it really sort of maybe to a certain extent it motivates to return. So it's out there. It's something that is used quite a bit. And within games and the whole computer games, it's used enormously. It's not surprising that when they're marketing new games, there's a huge bonus given to people who are loyal customers, or who sign up first, or pre-purchase, and all of that type of thing has become really important. And oftentimes the rewards they give you aren't necessarily cash awards, but they're points that you can recoup either within the game or within the, I suppose, suite of products that the games company owns. So it's really the whole thing about gamification, especially, well, internal and external gamification, is around encouraging people to change their behavior, or moderate their behavior at least. And I suppose this isn't a theory, but say if you're looking at motivation, one of the, I suppose, are around behavior change, it's going from where you are to where you want to be. And like there's effort needed to move from one to the other. And they would say in an educational sense, you know, what's really important is that feedback is given to people as they make effort. So it's hard work, it can be hard work to move from one point to the next, but it's made better and easier, and it's more likely for people to continue on the journey if they're continually getting feedback. And that's one of the things that gamification tries to do. It tries to give people continual feedback. You know, you have 100 kilometers to go, but you've gone 1 kilometer, so we're giving you a badge. You've gone 10 kilometers, we're giving you another badge. And there is that sense in which people are being encouraged to move ahead the whole time. So that whole thing about motivation and feedback being important, especially if they're if what you're asking people to do is challenging. So in sort of, what would you say, motivation is like around gamification, it is really important, the whole concept of motivation, because gamification doesn't work for everybody. And part of the sort of thing about gamification is that it relies a lot on extrinsic motivation. Okay, so in motivation, there's extrinsic motivation and there's intrinsic motivation. We spoke about this one of the days in Athlone, but extrinsic motivation is really about rewards. Intrinsic motivation is the internal satisfaction that you get from doing something or being better, or, you know, achieving. So some people have, I suppose, are very intrinsically motivated and don't necessarily need gamification to encourage them to improve or change their behavior. Whereas other people respond really well and positively to rewards and to the sense that they're being acknowledged for changing. And that's really, I suppose, what gamification relies on to a large extent. It relies on that sense of extrinsic motivation. And we looked at this before as well, but in games, this is a sort of a really important diagram, or it's a really, yeah, it's an important diagram within games and how games are designed. And at the heart of it is the whole idea of motivation. So what it's trying to say is that on one level you have your skills, and the other level, on the horizontal of your skills, on the vertical you have your challenge. And what you really want is the activity or the game or the learning. This is true of, you know, of education as much as it is of games. But what you want is, you want the skills level to match the challenge, and the challenge level to match the skills. So as somebody is developing their skills, you need to increase the challenge. And as they're being challenged, you need to increase the levels of skills. And what you want to try to make sure is that it's in that zone whereby they're comfortable. They're comfortable that their skills are increasing and their challenge is increasing, and the challenge is increasing and the skills are increasing. So if the skills are higher than they're ready for, and so sorry, if the challenge is higher than they're ready for in terms of their skills, then they become anxious, so because they can't do what they're being asked to do, so it causes a degree of anxiety or distress. And on the other level, if what they're being asked to do is much lower than what their skilled what their skill level is, they become bored. So the idea is, insofar as possible, to keep people motivated by encouraging and increasing the level of challenge as their skills increase. So that's really, I suppose, within games or gamification, what you're constantly trying to do. You're trying to get people to improve and offer them better and higher challenges, and they develop their skills, and you continue like that. So this idea of flow within games, and you hear now flow in education, and you hear flow in films, and a whole range of different things. And that's really what it's about. It's that balance between skills or engagement and challenge. So that's really, I suppose, probably an important diagram in terms of behavior in games. The other thing, and we spoke about this the last day as well, is that different people play games for different reasons. And some people, they play games, if you go around this hexagon here, they play games on the bottom there as a player. And what we mean by that is that they're really just interested in playing and getting on with the game. And their motivation is really a sense of reward. If you go to the inner red hexagon there. So they're really interested in playing, winning, getting rewards. They find it cool, and they're just doing it for that sake of doing it. You got a socializer then, and a socializer likes to play games because they develop and they can relate with other people, and that's really important for them, whether they win or not. I mean, it's not that it's immaterial to them, but what's more important to them is that they enjoy and they have a good social time and they meet people. The philanthropist then on the left is somebody who plays in order to contribute. So what they're doing is oftentimes they're playing, and they're playing in a very generous way, and they're helping other players, and they get a kick oftentimes out of playing and for other people to achieve and to win. So they're constantly looking out for the other people in the game, and that's what they enjoy doing. I'll leave the disruptor for the second, but on the bottom right hand side there you've the achiever, and the achiever is there to win and to be the best person at playing the game. And once they've achieved that, insofar as they feel they've mastered the game, they lose interest. So you often find that there's people who once they complete a game, they won't play it again because they feel they've gotten everything they can get from the game by having completed it. So there are people like that their real motivation is to get as good as they possibly can at playing the game. And then you have a free spirit, just uses the game as a form of artistic expression. So they're on their own and they can be in the game and not really engage necessarily competitively in the game, but they just enjoy being present in the game, and they like the story of the game perhaps, or they like the creative expression within the game. Winning or losing maybe doesn't matter to them so much. And then at the top you have a disruptor, and a disruptor really likes to change things. She likes to break the game maybe, or expose the weaknesses in the game. And their motivation really is to change the game, make the game better, make it worse perhaps. So some disruptors, their intention is to break the game, to show that they can break the game. Other disruptors' motivation is to point out the weaknesses in the game in order to make it better. But regardless of what type of person, within games people play differently, and that's certain games lend themselves to certain player types, and certain games discourage certain player types. And other games encourage all of these types of players to play it. I mean, you could think of Monopoly, and you could think how all of these types of players would be equally able to play in a game of Monopoly, whereas perhaps poker or field sports, it's less likely that you would, I suppose, tolerate disruptors or free spirits in games like that. You do need people who are more players, socializers, or achievers. So certain games would encourage certain player types. Okay, so I suppose the reason to look at that and look at is this gets to the bottom of why you would use gamification in a youth work context, and how people might respond to gamification. And to be conscious, sorry, that some people, when they see that it's a bit of a game or there's a game element to it, some people will maybe respond negatively to it, some people respond positively to it. Okay. So I suppose this is really where, from a games perspective, from a games design perspective, where we look at the different elements of gamification. So in the games design literature, they talk about three things. They talk about the mechanics of the game, the dynamics of the game, and the effects of the game, or the mechanics, the dynamics, and the aesthetics. But anyway, the idea of the three things. One is the mechanics, is the things that happen within the game. The rules are the actual way you play the game. The dynamics are how that happens, what those rules or what those pieces are those. So rolling the dice would be a mechanic, and the dynamic then is what that does in the game. It moves the piece along and it gives people progression within the game. And the effects then is how that feels and how it plays out in the game. So the effects might be that it might be chance or it might be skill. So I'll just go down through this again a little bit. So the mechanics are, as we say, the rules. The dynamics are then how that plays out in the game, and the aesthetics or the effects are how people experience it. So if you look at mechanics, typical mechanics that you might have in games, one, I'll just go through, one might be a sort of a mechanic, might be achievements. So it could be stickers, or it could be achievement badges. Avatars are another mechanic. So an avatar is the character that you might play in a game. And if you look through the list there of mechanics, so is there any of those mechanics that anybody has no idea what it is or hasn't come across the term before? Would you have come across them all before?
I'm not just sure about social graphs. What's that now?
Okay, that's social graphs. Is there any other ones that anybody hasn't come across? Okay, that's cool. Now, social graphs are where there's a mapping done of who's communicating with who. So in some games, it can show you who's communicating with you, or how many friends you have, or how many likes you've gotten.
Okay.
So it shows a sort of a leaderboard almost of the social interaction that there is between players. So I suppose the most common one now, and these are sort of gamification elements have gotten into social media enormously. So social graphs are a big thing now in terms of number of likes, number of follows, that type of thing, and how many responses people have gotten to particular posts, and that's, I suppose, what's meant by social graphs. If anybody isn't, the other term, boss fights, would anybody have come across that term, boss fights?
Yeah, like in Mario and yeah.
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 So it's the big fight right at the very end, or whatever it might be, or the end of a level, or the end of the game. Okay, so the rest of them are fairly straightforward. Would anybody have come across, say, quests within games?
Yeah.
What that's Aisling, is it?
Yeah, hi.
How you doing, Aisling?
Hiya.
Do you want
to...
Yeah, and say with quests, what sort of stuff, or what would you have experienced them?
Yeah, they're often in RPGs and stuff. They're like little jobs that you need to do. So you can have they can be big quests that are part of like the main storyline that you have to do, and then there's little kind of ones like someone will ask you, I need this hammer or something, please go ask the hammer maker. You go to the hammer maker, I lent the hammer to somebody else, and you have to go on all this wild goose chase to get
the hammer. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's I'm sort of trying to think of an example of a quest in a non-digital game. I mean, hide and seek type of games, or I suppose I think we were talking about the geocaches, where you go looking for a treasure that's hidden, that type of thing. Treasure hunts, all of that would be sort of something like quests. The other one there that I sort of always wonder about how useful they are, in a youth work context, or even again, is leaderboards. Where a leaderboard is where they tell you which player is doing best and second best, and give the points everybody has, so you can see where you appear on the leaderboard. But I often found, and I don't know whether your experience would reflect this, but if you take table quizzes, that would be a classic example of where you have a leaderboard. And what you find halfway through a table quiz is those that are in the bottom half of the leaderboard just lose interest because they know they can never win. And you often find that it's only those who are in the top 4 or 5 sort of places within the leaderboard remain motivated. So leaderboards can be quite demotivating for people. Do you think, or is it something you've come across?
Yeah, there can be, especially in games where there's a high emphasis on skill, like a lot of shooting games and stuff, there would be leaderboards. And like, I know in Overwatch there's a big thing of getting into the top 500. So it's kind of seen as that's kind of the highest sort of rank of all, as being the top 500 in your region. And it can be very much that those players are able to lord it over other players, and all it means is that you have a little number right next to your profile. Like, it can change from month to month, but yeah, some people can get very bogged down kind of with this feeling like, oh well, I'm no good because I didn't get into top 500, and they could be playing the game even competitively. It's like
yeah. I mean, I don't know whether any of you've come across. I came across a table quiz one time, and what they used to do was, and they never said this, but at a particular point in the game, they split the leaderboard in two, and they said, okay, we're going to have League 1 and League 2. So they took the top 10 and they said, you're all competing for first prize, and now the bottom 10 are all competing for second prize. And it just kept everybody that little bit more engaged, if you know what I mean, because everybody felt they had something to compete for. Okay, so that's I suppose what, broadly speaking, what we're looking at in terms of mechanics. And if you look at how mechanics are, what they respond to, I suppose, different motivations or different desires that people have around rewards or status or achievement or self-expression or competition, altruism. So in a lot of ways, you can create a mechanic that responds to the different types of motivation that you want to encourage. And things like gifting and that charity can become a really important part of a game. I had reason the other day to look at if you look at gifting. Aisling mentioned Overwatch there. Overwatch is a role play game. Blizzard are the games company that have developed it. But last year, they organized a charity event in the game for cancer research. And there's a character, and Aisling will have mentioned her a couple of times. Angel.
Mercy, yeah.
Mercy, sorry, it's Mercy.
She is an angel, though. Like
she is an angel.
Lady.
She is an angel, exactly. But they had a skin that you could buy for Mercy.
20 it was like 20 quid, I think.
20 quid. Do you have any sense how much they raised for cancer research in 2 weeks? I know it's.
Oh, it was a good few million. I think it was like 10 million or something.
It was 12 million. And it was the biggest corporate donation that American Cancer Research ever received. And it was raised in that game in 2 weeks. So I suppose the potential that there is for mobilizing that altruistic instinct within games can be really, really positive. There's other games where there's other things that you can do in other games to give your time or give your virtual money or your real money to charities. So there is that sense both in the game as a mechanic and exchanging things with other players in the game, but also looking at real life causes. It's a really interesting thing that's emerging in games. So that's it, and that's mechanics. And then, so what I would say in terms of gamification, these are the types of things, these mechanics are the things that you want to use in gamification. So you want to potentially use in your youth work practice, or you can use achievements, so like rewards, as people do. You can use avatars, get people to take characters. Boss fights don't need to be violent boss fights. They can be a sort of a final roundup event at the end of a workshop. Collections can be something that you use as a way of encouraging people to attend events in a consistent way. You give them something that has a currency in some ways. Combat, and again, use combat and boss fights. Combat doesn't necessarily need to be, it can be a quiz, is combat in one way. So all of these things, so when we say gamification, you look at these things and you say, okay, can I use one of these things in my practice? And all of these youth workers use these things the whole time in what they do. And they do them to, I suppose, respond to these different desires that young people might have around reward, status, achievement, expression, competition, and altruism. And I suppose the thing about dynamics then is that dynamics creates, the mechanics of the game creates this experience for players. And those experiences are what you call the dynamics in the game. So the dynamic might be that feeling of challenge that a mechanic makes. So what you might want to do is encourage that feeling of challenge, and you might put a mechanic in that would encourage challenge, or you might want to encourage chance. So one of the really good things about gamification can be you create a randomness in outcomes that benefits everybody. So it means that the person who usually wins at things, who's competitive or who's sort of motivated by mastery and always wants and feel they need to win. You know, if you introduce chance, they won't always win, and it could be somebody who wouldn't be quite as competitive or quite as good at the game can win. So you can introduce chance strategically to give a variation in terms of who gets opportunities to play the game. And then ranks, you know, I suppose at a very crude level, if you look at, say, ranks, what you mean by this is really within a game or within a context, people take different roles based on the amount of progress they've made in a game. The Boy Scouts would be an example where there's ranks in the Boy Scouts based on, I presume, the accumulation of tasks that you've done over the years. So all of these things, then feedback and cooperation and rewards, transactions within a game, turns and win states. So what we mean by a win state is that everybody knows at the beginning of the game that when you get 10 of these particular rewards, or these 10 particular complete 10 particular challenges, you win. And it's by accumulating these that you win the game. And that can be really important for some people in playing the game, because they need to know what the end point is and what the objective is. So that's really, I suppose, so that's the dynamics. So the dynamics really is the things that you're trying to make happen using the mechanics. You're trying to create chance, challenge, rewards, feedback, cooperation. These are the actual things you want to do. So and that's within gamification. It's within a game as well, but it's goes to the heart of gamification. These are the things that you want. So I mean, so that's really, and then the effects are, I suppose, in some ways the feeling or the sensational or the emotion that you want the player to feel, the person playing the game. And one can be progress. So it means you know, that sense of achievement that you get from learning something or doing something or developing a skill or developing a relationship. You also want them to learn that there's boundaries or constraints. And games can be a really good way of encouraging, or gamification can be a really good way of encouraging people to appreciate that there needs to be limits in certain circumstances to behavior, because there are consequences with behavior. And gamification or games can be good in that respect, because you can mimic negative consequences without there being negative consequences. Another sort of side of things is empathy. You know, one of the things that games can be really good at doing is encouraging empathy. And not everybody is as open to empathetic feelings as everybody else. But I suppose one of the things that games can do is bring that out, that sense of walking in somebody else's shoes or experiencing something that you wouldn't normally experience in your own life. The sense of discovery in games, and oftentimes discovery in terms of your own abilities, but also the abilities of the people around you. Oftentimes in a game or using gamification, you can discover skills that people had that you wouldn't have been aware of, or they wouldn't necessarily express those skills, or wouldn't have the opportunity to express them. And then fellowship, in terms, I suppose, in terms of the camaraderie that people can feel by being a member of a clan or a guild or a team. And I suppose finally that sense of expression that games can often give people, an identity that they can give people, and acknowledgement. And this is and the gamification. So a leaderboard can be a really important thing for somebody who might otherwise not see themselves as being a high achiever. And if they see that progression, it can be a very powerful motivator for people. So while sort of gamification, it can be difficult to use game elements to develop, because these are really high level sort of emotional responses in many ways. But you do need to be conscious that if you want to develop empathy or fellowship, that using the different game dynamics or mechanics can be really useful in doing that. So I suppose if you're looking at developing sort of something around gamification, so I mean, maybe an example might be something like using a game card for a workshop, or using leaderboards to reward people's attendance or behavior, or whatever it might be. You do need to have a real sense, rather than just throw it out there. You do need to have a real sense as to why you're using it. Why are you using, and give yourself, 3 is always a good number. What are the three reasons for using this? And is there another way of achieving it? And why aren't we doing that other way? And this isn't to put you off gamification, but it's purely for you to be conscious that you're using gamification with intent. That you've decided, yeah, this is what I want to achieve. I'm going to use a gamification process to achieve it. There are other ways of doing it, but I actually feel this is the best way. And the danger is that people only use gamification, and games more broadly, but gamification, because it's fun, or it's perceived to be fun. And fun is enormously important, and of course games have to be fun, and gamification elements have to have fun, but if the emphasis is more on the fun than the youth work, then you have to question whether it's youth work, or how it's youth work, or how it's contributing to youth work. And what you do need to be conscious of is that all of this gamification, or using games within youth work, is scaffolded by good youth work practice. So some people might feel that, I'm not saying that it's an alternative to youth work, but that diminishes the amount of youth work that needs to be done if you can get people playing different games. In fact, probably the opposite is the case. If you're using games properly, it's harder work maybe at times than I suppose doing other types of exercises, because young people will always challenge you on games. They'll always poke at the game, and and that's brilliant. It's really the gift the games give, but it can be really challenging of a youth worker. But I think it's a really good thing. The other thing to be conscious of is that you're not developing games just because people love playing games, and people, it's not a bad place to start, but there needs to be real objectives towards it as well. I think the other thing I'm sort of increasingly becoming conscious of in relation to games and using games in youth work, or gamification in youth work, is that increasingly there's big expectations, that people are saying, oh, we can use games to do drug awareness, we can use games to improve school attendance, we can use gamification to and it can be part of a solution, but it's a lot of the times there's unrealistic expectations from gamification type projects, especially given the constraints that there is in budgets. Oftentimes, you don't have huge budgets to develop these type of things, and it's just ideas. Okay, and if the game is trying to change behavior, we need to be very clear what that behavior is. We need to be very clear what the behavior that the game is, the game or the gamification is trying to change. And oftentimes you find that that's an awful lot more complicated, identifying the behavior that you want to change than it might appear. So if it's so there can be a lot of things contributing to a particular type of behavior. That's what I'm, I suppose, trying to say. Behavioral change is enormously challenging, and games can contribute to it, but you do need to get a clear sense of what it is, what behavior it is you're trying to change. Okay, so that's it. That's where I was hoping to finish. Is that, what do you think? Is there any sort of, is there anything there that you're unsure about, or is there anything you want me to go over, or is there anything you feel might be useful?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think, I suppose, from a point of view of, I'm thinking of a Lego club or something like that, and using a leaderboard or something like that around that. So I suppose these questions are good for me to sit down and think about it.
Yeah.
How can I encourage the collaboration and the sharing and the problem solving in that group, using maybe not even a leaderboard, but something? I'll just have to sit down and think of that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the really, Lego is I think it's really brilliant as a tool to because it has everything in it in some ways. Even that idea of collectibles, some of the little characters. What I've noticed kids doing, is it Sharon?
Sorry, no, Megan.
Megan, sorry, Megan. What I've noticed some kids doing, and it is brilliant, if is you can get the little Lego characters with blank
minifigures.
Yeah, the minifigures with blank faces.
Okay.
And depending on the age the kids are, is if you can get them to paint the minifigures.
Oh.
So if you ever go to a games shop, there's a games a thing called Warhammer, and they have paint kits that allow you to, they're acrylic paints. You get them in any craft shop. The reason I'm saying Warhammer is the paints are just very good, and the brushes are very good at doing detailed. So I've seen kids just totally paint over the costumes on the minifigures and just create their own costumes and their own minifigures.
Well, that'd be cool.
Isn't it cool?
Mm.
And little things like that. There's another sort of Lego game I saw, and I was going to buy it. I saw it last week, and I was just too mean to buy it. It was a little bit expensive, but what the idea was you have cards with things on them, so it could be a house, or it could be a car, or it could be, and the game you play is they pick a card and they have to make the thing on the card from Lego.
Yes.
And the other people have to guess what it was that was on the card.
Yeah, we have a few of those. You can actually download some of the
brilliant
cards online. So we have those downloaded and laminated. But
brilliant.
I suppose it was just to track, because we're doing it in it's more of a family sport kind of setting. It was to track the social skills and their development, and it's trying to do it in a fun way.
Yes, absolutely.
But even the prizes of, as you said, like instead of getting a badge, maybe you get a certain minifigure.
Yeah.
You do really well, maybe you get a minifigure. Now I know they cost a fortune, but maybe that's the way that at the end of every term, whoever shared the most or whatever gets a certain minifigure, and you collect the set.
Yeah, Absolutely, and that it is, and it is little things like that. I wouldn't. I mean, I know if you could build in somewhere. I think. See, one of the interesting things about Lego is that. I mean, I could track it, see if I could track it down. But if you customize the minifigures and give them out, sometimes people really value the things they make themselves,
Yeah.
or the things other people make, and it has a meaning beyond even the sort of commercial value that a lot of the expensive minifigures might have. But yeah, Lego is great. I think the other thing, just if you are thinking of leaderboards and stuff like that, one of the things that I found really useful with leaderboards is to have maybe 3 different categories of points for a leaderboard. So one might be behavior isn't the word I'd use, but fun, or how you participated, and another was how you your timing or whatever it might be, whether people, and have 3 or 4 so that on balance people can make up for poor not poor performance, but lower, so the leaderboard becomes something that's multifaceted rather than being.
Oh yeah. We'd be looking at maybe like community, that you've talked to, people, or you've helped them. So maybe it's a joint project. That you actually took part in joint projects. So I suppose it's just when you were talking there, that's where my mind was going.
Yeah, no, that really makes sense. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. No, thank you, Paul.
No problem. Is that okay? Is there anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question just about the games that we're making, if that's okay.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just, do they need to be finished by the time we're going to meet up in Ballymun? As there's been, I thought we had to have kind of basically the major sort of design stuff done by then.
What I would say, Aisling, is that it would be ideal if we did. I'm sort of conscious that that's a big ask, but what it would be good to have done at a minimum by Ballymun is that people are aware of the pieces that they want to use.
Okay.
So the game pieces, that they've a good sense of what game pieces are going to be used. If there's more details needed about the board and the rules, maybe, and maybe some of those things, we can sort those out. But if we were able to tic-tac, and we might even do it next week, to tic-tac on each of the games and what pieces, make a list of the various different pieces that you feel you're going to need in order to be able to play the game. I think that would be enough to have done for Ballymun.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Wait, sorry, hold on just a moment. All right, no, sorry, that was just a message from Erin saying that was great. Thank you. That was from earlier. Sorry.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Well, if that's it, we'll sort of wrap it up, and hopefully I'll get this up. I'll fix that glitch with the the quiz, and ensure that it doesn't, when we're talking about leaderboards, that it doesn't, it actually gives a proper mark, and hopefully that'll be working when you try it again.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thanks
you,
a million,
Paul.
lads. All the best.
Cool. Okay, thank
Cheers,
you.
then. All the best.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Megan Aisling Eyring.
Hi, Paul. I'm still here.
Is that Barbara?
No, it's Catherine.
Catherine, how are you doing? And I think Erin is there as well. But
yes. Just wanted to check with you. Erin is gone now too. Barbara would join. Are you available for a chat? Could we talk maybe by mobile phone? We can call you, because then we both can talk.
Yeah, that's
better than with Zoom, because we're both here in the office.
Okay, that's grand. Could I actually? Would it be okay if you rang me on the landline?
No. Do you have the number there? Maybe.
I'll give you my number. It's 0504
0504
28269.
28269. And do you need a break of 5 minutes or something to go to the loo or whatever?
No, what I might just do, I just want to make sure that, because last week the recording didn't upload.
Yeah, but I saw it's now uploaded.
It's uploaded now, but I just want to make sure before I leave that I have the recording saved.
Good.
So that would be